Okay, so I know we've covered, I think we covered one fish in particular from Christchurch on the Lynch Hill complex, which was the Black Mirror, but I haven't done the complex or the lake, or the two lakes that I fished, should I say, enough justice. So I'm going to do a separate chapter just about the whole transformation of what went on there, because not only did we catch a lot of lovely looking fish, I learned so much, but also we didn't half mess around and piss around, and it was just absolute carnage at times, which we will come to that. So it's worth mentioning that I did stumble across Lynch Hill. I joined the guys syndicate and I did a session. I think I might have covered this in the Black Mirror section. I didn't like it. So then I got some friends who were fishing on Christchurch. So I went to see him and I thought, oh my God, it's amazing this. His friendly faces, the fish were just topping and they catch him on the top. It was mega. And obviously Petals was the main prize. Petals was an upper 40 at the time, which was just an astro-biblical carp for the early 2000s, you know. But behind that, there was no backup 40-pounders. The backup stock were all mid-30s, not all, but mid-30s all the way down to doubles, but again, 20 years ago, these were huge fish, and it wasn't, the size was important back then to me, but also how they looked, and they just look fantastic, don't they, Lynch Hill carp? So the lake that I targeted was Christchurch. I did dabble on Willow when Christchurch was too busy. I never went on Stone Acres, which I do regret, because we used to walk past it and we were so out of depth. You know, I was out of my depth on Christchurch. Bearing in mind, I come from fishing up north on park lakes, and then I'm suddenly just chucked into this circuit fishing on Lynch Hill, where you've got anglers from all over the country who are coming to fish for petals. That's all they want to catch is petals. You had some big names on there, and it was absolute carnage. But at the time I started to fish it was day ticket, but then it went a mixture of syndicate and day ticket, and luckily I got a ticket. So I met some really sort of lifelong friends that I still speak to now. We've got Mick the Greek, Danny Stroud, Danny Applin. You got, who else was the Roaster from Gloucester? You got Wacker. There was loads of lads, Dave Cochler from up north. There was Charlie Breeze and Kerry from up north. There was lads from down south. Terry Earn would drop on, Lee Collins. It was fantastic. It was a real good atmosphere. At times, the atmosphere did get a bit out of hand, you know, drinking, illegal substances. It did get a bit messy a few times, but that was all part of it back then. You got the calf up the road, even back to, like, you know, you'd see the bite time out on a Saturday morning, then you go up the calf to have a full English, and then you just go and have a piss around down at Gaza Products, which is a tackle shop sort of down near Whitney, you know, and they had some real tricks. It was just a great, or we go to J&K and then we come back afternoon, spot up, get the rods out, but, you know, I remember just sort of going on there and thinking, sorry about that. Can't have a fly in the room when I'm trying to record. It was really pissing me off. So I've gone on there. The first swim I ever fished. Now, obviously, there was numbered swims on Christchurch. This is before it was dug and extended to what it is today. So I remember fishing in Peg 2, quite weedy. You know, I didn't find the lake that difficult, to be honest, but obviously the pressure from other anglers was what was getting, because every swim was taken. It was such a busy water even 20 years ago, because the prizes were so worth the effort. So you didn't want to go on there and make a fool of yourself, even though I was nowhere near as experienced as people like Danny Stroud and Mick the Greek. Mick the Greek was, you know, I got really friendly with Mick. And he was a proper character from down in London, a bit younger than me, but we both had similar tastes in beer and drugs and just being complete helmets, to be honest. There was Gaz Atkins that was on there, and like I say, it was just a real friendly atmosphere. But it was back then we were using a lot of really short hook links, a lot of big Series 5 hooks, you know, things that you would frown upon now. They're not really in vogue anymore. And you get absolute piss-balling takes. You lift the rod up, it's on, and it's off. And obviously that was the inexperience, because what everyone was fishing like that, solid bags, tiny hooks, tiny little hook baits. Because if you look at some of the pictures of the Lynch Hill fish, they've got tiny mouths. And everyone was used to say, well, you'll never catch on a boilie here. They won't get a 15 mil bully in the mouth. I mean, what a load of bollocks. You look back, but you get dragged into fishing the same as everybody else. Well, I did back then. I don't anymore, because I just do what I do, and if I catch, I catch. If I blank, I blank. But you almost want to fit in. I really wanted to fit in with this. There was a couple of clicks, And I wanted to be in that clique. I make no bones about it. You know, I was working for Armled. I'd started to do a bit in the magazines, magazine features. There was no filming back then, really. So I wanted to be successful because I did feel the pressure. And I think it's the only period in me fishing where I felt jealousy or anger towards somebody else catching a fish or a target fish. And I look back on that and I'm ashamed of that, you know, because we used to think we were better than the day ticket anglers. Because we were members of the syndicate, we'd kind of look down our noses at day ticket anglers. But, you know, I mean, Derek would only let a few on because he didn't want it to be absolutely rammed all the time. But Derek loved money. So you get a random day ticket angler coming on a Friday, setting up in probably one of the last two little pokey holes on the pond, fishing a couple of rods close in, catches one bite, has petals. And that was getting to me. I was thinking, for God's sake, you know, I'm catching consistently. You know, Danny Stroud is catching consistently. I thought other people deserved to catch that fish than a random day ticket angler. And now I look back and think that's absolute rubbish. They've got just as much right to catch that fish as I have. And fair play, it's good angling and how they caught it. But at the time, I was so obsessed with trying to progress in the fishing industry that I thought that I had to keep catching 30-pounders to put them in carp talk every week. And it all got a bit too much. But I had a word with myself. I really did. And I come back with a fresh attitude. And it was a couple of mates that said, look, Tong, you're being a bit of a knob here. You know, it's just fishing. Just go fishing, catch your fish, and let other people, you know, relish in other people's success as well as your own. And once that bit of advice sunk in, I enjoyed it much more. But Lynch Hill, certainly Christchurch and Willow, were very stereotypical lakes of spots. So the anglers that would stand out above people like me or Mick the Greek were people like Danny Stroud that didn't have a problem finding their own spots within spots. And I saw Stroudy, he was the master at finding a spot to the point where, like, Danny would tell me where he was fishing. So then if I went in that swim on another day, like, I couldn't find that spot. He was just so good at finding those spots. And I learned a lot from Dan about, that's where I really sort of honed the skills, feeling the lead down, you know, really fine-tuning spots, 2 markers. I really sort of got my head around big carp fishing because we all wanted to catch. So, I mean, obviously you got petals, but you again got fish like the ironing board, hamster, slate grey, the big fully, the little fully, the perch common. There was another couple of mid-30 commons that we were lucky enough to catch. But even, you know, I mean, I've given Ollie the pictures to scan. All the pictures from Lynch Hill are print pictures. That's how long ago it was. And I look back at them now, and I really don't think I appreciated how fortunate I was to be fishing for those fish back then. Because a lot of them are gone now. And you know, I'd love somebody like Scott Lloyd or somebody like that that's really well in at Lynch Hill, or Nick, who's the bailiff there, to look at some of the pictures I've got of some of these low to mid 20-pounders. Absolutely beautiful. And we were just a couple of pictures slipping back. You know, we all it was about was catching the big fish. And I sort of lost my track, like I said, I lost my way a bit, really. And once I got back to the grassroots of it, but now I look back and think, God, I was so fortunate to catch those carp. And it was sort of around, I've been on there a couple of years. We'd had a couple of little antics. We used to catch like tench, or they call small carp, or a bream. There was a little pond next door to Christchurch, which is now what I think they call the area, the New Dig. So we used to put all the fish in there that we caught that we didn't want. So if you caught one that was small or a bit busted, or, you know, got a busted up mouth, or you caught a tench or a bream, we'd put them in this little pond that was about 2 acres. So then the one winter when we found out they were digging the gravel, they were digging the pit behind Christchurch, which was a big old deep pit. So once they'd harvested all the gravel, they were then working their way back. So then the roadway was going to be dug back. So then the lakes were going to be joined. So all the bloody fish that we put in that we didn't want in Christchurch have now gone back into the main lake. But other than that, I mean, there's a lot of features there now, because obviously when it was dug away by the diggers, it was all up and down. But the main bowl of Christchurch, if you like, is just that. It's a bowl. It was very 12, 13 foot deep. All there was weed, silt and gravel. That's all there was. The new dig was slightly different because obviously the diggers have been in and excavated everything at different depths. There's loads of features around sort of the swims like Peg 1 or the Bacon, as it used to be called. So you've got a funny story about the Bacon and about Peg 1, really, because when they were digging the pit, they've got a massive big industrial pump in there to pump all the water out to keep it as dry as possible for when it's digging. So all the water used to get pumped back into Christchurch. I think what had also happened is when they dug the pit behind, they dug below the water table. So Christchurch was leaking water, so they had to keep it pumping back in. Well, the pump wasn't going all the time, but as you know, when you put a big industrial pump in a water like that, the fish just home in on it it's like the Pied Piper. You're sitting there playing a flute, and it can be a banging southwesterly down into the end trees, and all the fish are up in the Bacon or in Peg 1 on the back of the wind because this pump is just gushing that much water out. Like you could stand on the bank where the pipe was going in and you could feel the ground like that, but the carp did not care. The carp were in it, they were around it, they absolutely loved it. So what we sussed is if you saw one of the workers in the pump, these swims were just circuit swims. Me and Mick the Greek were rotating swims because Mick had fished from Sunday to Thursday, I'd fish from Thursday to Sunday, we just keep swapping. That happened for a couple of months, but Peg 1 and the pump, as we used to call it, or it's now called the Bacon, I think it's called, that's where the pump was. So they'd move it from one end to the other. If it wasn't on and you were lucky enough to get in one of them swims, you could, if you saw one of the workmen, bung him a fiver and he'd put the pump on. Guaranteed to catch big fish. Honestly, it was ridiculous. So we kind of thought, me being a norther, being a tight bastard, I thought, well, it's £5 this is. So we learned how to turn the pump on ourselves. So of course, the workman would go, me and Mick, we'd turn the pump on, fish are coming from all over the lake and we're catching loads of carp. Until one day, the bloody pump blew up. We did something to the pump and the pump wouldn't work. So of course, we had to make a bit of a sharp egg. We thought we were just going to get banned, honestly. We never did because nobody grassed on us. But obviously, they've come back to work on the Monday, the pump's not working. They seemed like a new one, but for us, we thought we were in shit street. But it probably wasn't that big a deal. They wouldn't have sussed it was a couple of anglers that probably broke the key in the bloody lock or something like that. But it was just instant, honest. Places like that, that's where I learnt how to use the washing line method as well in Peg 1 or in the Bacon, because you could cast over onto the gravel, walk around, clip your rig on, and because there was two slopes, two shelves if you like, you could just lower the rig on, bit of hemp and corn, pallet, that's how we were fishing. Bob was your uncle, but it was just the buzz of being there, honestly. And I look back now and I look back with fondness and I'm smiling because I had such good times. Now, I don't really have had a bad time, other than when my kind of ego got a bit the better of me, really. And then once my mates had brought me back into line, I was fine. But you were either fishing known spots in Christchurch or you were fishing in the edge. It really is as simple as that. But would I do it differently now? Absolutely. God, I would do it differently, because towards the end of my time on there, I was doing quite a lot of writing when I was coming to the end of my time on Lynch Hill. And I didn't plan on it being the end of my time, because I'd written an article about plans for the future, and I'd mentioned that I wanted to go on to Stoneacres, and there was a bit of a clique on Stoneacres that really wanted to, they wanted to keep it to themselves. They definitely looked down their noses at Christchurch and Willow anglers because they were fishing a bigger pit than we were for what they deemed for more important fish than we were. You know, it wasn't the case, but we were out of depth. But I'd written about the fact I was going to have a go on Stoneacres, and then mysteriously I wasn't offered a ticket the next year. So I think the clique had got to Fletch, the bloke that was running it for Derek at the time, and I think he bowed down to peer pressure that he didn't want these kind of media whores or wannabes on Stoneacres blowing it all out of the water. Well, everybody knows or knew what was in Stoneacres. You know, it was as simple as that. So that's how my time on Lynch came to an end. But would I go back? I probably wouldn't, because now I don't crave that circuit style as much as I used to, where you're sort of in the next swim to one of. There's a few rules in place now. I mean, we never used to fish the winters on Christchurch because it was an absolute bog hole. No, I'm very OCD, but even early spring, there was always loads of hay and straw around Christchurch because it was that muddy. Derek would just think, well, that'll mop it all up, and that'll stop your barrows from sliding off, and you just slide down the bank with your barrow. It was horrific. It was a mud bath, honestly. There was only crazy guys that would, like Fletch would fish the winter. Dave Lane did a winter on Christchurch, and even he said it was a shithole, as in mud-wise. He caught some nice carp. Not many of them, though. He only had these really small windows, and they were very switched on carp back then. The Christchurch and Willow fish. We haven't really spoke about Willow much yet, but Willow was always the lake where we'd go on. If we had a bit of a belly full of Christchurch, we used to call Willow Tea and Biscuits, and Christchurch was lager and cocaine. or lager and drugs. And that's the difference in the lakes, because Willow was a gentleman's little lake. Christchurch was just absolute carnage at times. It wasn't always carnage. Weekends were quite bad at times. But Willow was Tea and Biscuits. So we'd always go on tea. And what the Tea and Biscuit Brigade didn't like is when people like me, Mick, Danny, Roaster, Matt, we'd all just pile over there on, 5 of us come trudging past with barrows. And people are thinking, what the hell's going on here? Like, the lager boys have arrived. We weren't that loud at all, honestly, but there was some lovely fish in Willow as well. Willow I always thought was easier than Christchurch because there was more room between swims, there was a few more features, there was an island, there was snags. It just got something a bit more about it, but I never did that much. I had a few fish, I had some nice 30-pound commons out of there, but I always loved Christchurch, I really did. And then I didn't pull off because Petals died. Petals was caught and then she was dropped. And everybody assumes that that's why she passed away. But she was an old fish. But then, obviously, what you had then is the other hierarchy came through. So you never had a real flyer. But, like I say, fish like the perch came through, the slate grey, the hamster, the ironing board, I think, ended up being the biggest fish in there. The big fully died and the little fully. But they were old fish anyway, and they got, you'll see from the pictures, they were caught a lot over the years, whether it was small and the mouths were quite busted, but they got tremendous scale patterns. They were just unbelievable looking carp, and I looked very young in the pictures because it was 20 odd years ago, so, but as a lake and a complex, I always thought it would reach its peak probably around the time that we were on there. And then it would just, be a level playing field, just a kind of normal fishery with nothing stand out about it. But that's completely false because it's now gone on to be this unbelievably well-run syndicate, and the fish are known to be some of the best-looking carp in the country. I don't really pay that much attention to it anymore. I don't really know that many people that fish it, but I know Scott Lloyd, again, I mentioned Scott because I know he did really well on all 3 lakes. And then he went off other places and he's gone back there again now. So he's obviously gone back for a reason. And I think it's got a bit of everything there. It's got amazing looking carp. It's got 2 smaller lakes. It's got Stoneacres, which is the bigger lake. It's got a calf. It's got a shop. It's got showers. It's got toilets. It's got everything you need. It's totally secure. And I think that's why people like going back there. There's different tickets you can buy. One for Stoneacres. I think you can buy a ticket for all 3 lakes. But when it went all syndicate, which wasn't that long ago, they put an announcement out on social media, and I think they said within like half an hour all the tickets were gone. If you speak to any angler in any part of the country, they all want to fish Lynch Hill because the fish are amazing. Now, I think that stems back from when they were amazing 20 years ago, when a lot of other fisheries weren't. You got the linears, the linear fisheries where they were putting a lot of plain simmos in because that's all there was available at the time. So of course these scaly and dark fish and the golden looking and the dark commons stood out like a sore thumb of being outstanding. I think now a lot of other fisheries have caught up with the standard of quality of fish at Lynch Hill, but there's something about that Lynch Hill complex that wasn't only just fantastic 20 odd years ago, but it is going to be fantastic in 20 years time from this date. So I'll always be thankful of my time on them. I had some good friends, had some amazing times, and of course some absolutely biblical carp.